All right, everyone, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for the Structured Conversations presentation. I'm happy to be here. I'm Bart Purcell, the Chief Technology Officer at Unizin. I'll be hosting today and happy to introduce my colleagues, Gwen Gorzelsky. She's the Executive Director of the Institute for Learning and Teaching at Colorado State University, a longtime Unizin member, as well as Lauren Marsh. She's an academic technologist and co-chair of the LA Dialogue Group at University of Minnesota. And both Lauren and Gwen are the co-chairs of the Unizin Faculty Development Subcommittee, which a lot of dialogue and conversations with that group really went into some of what you'll see here today. So with that, Lauren, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Bart. And about the Faculty Development Subcommittee, I want to comment that it is committed to supporting classroom practitioners and making sure that their needs are visible in the context of the work that we do in Unizin. And I am delighted to be here with my excellent colleague, Gwen. So, when we were here at the summit last year, about this time, we talked about rolling out the Structured Conversations initiative and engaging faculty at Unizin institutions in conversation to address this question that you see on the screen. What information about students' digital course activity and performance or course activities and content would be useful to you in order to support teaching and learning? So to date, 3 institutions have held 5 structured conversations. 2 more institutions are planning sessions for spring 2022. So today we're going to briefly review our process with you. We're going to share some results and implications for the feedback from faculty that we're harvesting. We're going to talk about efforts ongoing to support faculty in the area of learning analytics. And then we'd like to hear your thoughts about leveraging faculty feedback, the faculty feedback that we're gathering in what is an ongoing initiative. There's an excited dog behind me. Sorry about that. All right. So our method, we started by creating a faculty profile indicating the ideal participant for these discussions. So our focus is on classroom practitioners who make robust use of Canvas and its affordances and teach classes with 50 to 200 students. So recruitment and facilitation all happen at our individual institutions, but we have provided a lot of support. So we've made available institutional packages, which include facilitators, guides, and training videos, a slide deck for the meeting itself, examples of communication, and examples of the IRB submissions as we are all pushing and pulling ourselves through the IRB process at our different institutions. And we've also made available consultation and practice sessions, because really our goal is to create a network of people who are comfortable with these facilitation practice, because it's a method that is applicable in many ways in this Unizin environment. So again, the sessions that we are holding are all focused on this question on the screen in front of you. These are 90-minute online sessions with 4 to 10 faculty. The work of the session is to address this question. So as the term suggests, structured conversation, we take our participants through a highly organized session, and it starts with providing context for this guiding question. We give people time to brainstorm and reflect on the question themselves. And then we get them into groups to pair and share. I'm just going to write a note to management and ask him to please get my dog.
And it was ironic because before this started, you mentioned the dogs were rambunctious earlier, but it was quiet the 15 minutes before you started.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, so we get them into breakout groups to then pair and share, where they have an opportunity to talk through their the ideas that they've generated, and then we get everybody together in a large group to start to categorize, work with all the ideas that they've generated, and categorize these ideas. Finally, everybody has an opportunity to vote up their priorities, and wrapping up means recontextualizing the work that we're doing in the big picture. All right, so this is an artifact of a 90-minute online structured conversation, and we used Jamboard to simulate what would, if we're meeting in a face-to-face environment, we'd be using Post-its on a wall. So the individual items, the yellow digital sticky notes here, are the product of those conversations that faculty are having with each other. And these blue title cards up here, those are the process of making meaning, coming together, organizing, clustering these items as a way of making meaning of all the information that we have. And then you see these marks. We've got the red checks, blue X's, and green dots. That's the process of voting things up so that people are able to establish what their priorities are. So as I mentioned, we had 5 sessions. That means that we had 5 of those these artifacts to work with. So what we did is that the facilitators came together, and we worked at the level of the title cards, those blue title cards, and we did a card sorting activity. We clustered those together, and we gave them then new titles. That's the pink that you see here. So let me show you what that looks like, because the next step was to take these new title cards and reorganize all of that content under the title cards. And let me go to the items consolidated tab. So on row 3 here, those are the new title cards, which of course are meant to respect the intention of the original title cards. And then underneath here are all of those original items with the votes attached to them. So let me go over to, I just want to, I know that you can't read this on a small screen, but I want to give you a sense of the amount of information that we were able to harvest from these few conversations that we had. It was really encouraging. All right, so here's a dashboard. And what we've done is we came up with 4 major categories, and we organized them according to the votes. If you look in the far right-hand corner here, we were able to tally the votes from these individual sessions, and that determines the structure of the dashboard. And then we were able to establish the subcategories here. Give us information about specific dimensions of the category. So by far, most of the questions being asked were around understanding student behavior to positively impact learning. And in that context, our faculty are interested in establishing baselines and norms to better understand student behavior. They want to use data to guide or prompt student intervention. And they're interested in using the data to adjust their instructional approaches and to revise their course elements. And as you see, by far most of the activity falls in this area, which absolutely makes sense, by the way, if we revisit the question, which you can see up top here. So the question was really meant to prompt what would they like to know about their students' behavior and activity in the classroom. And then the second category, second in terms of the votes, is faculty want to use data ethically and effectively, and they expressed a need for some guidance in terms of how to do that. And then a lot of their questions, their I want to know statements involved flexible tools and data sets. They asked for functionality that is not yet available to them. And then interestingly, they asked for functionality that already exists in the system. And finally, you see analyze curricular data. Certainly wouldn't read too much into the fact that it only gets 2 points, because it was rather outside the scope of the question as we asked it. So I wouldn't read that to mean that there is not an interest in analyzing curricular trends. So I'll leave up this dashboard while I offer some of the key takeaways with this caveat. So to date, we have spent a lot of time organizing this information. We only came together a couple weeks ago to start to really consolidate information from across our 5 sessions. So we've been trying to come up with something that's readable and transparent. We haven't spent a lot of time yet digging down into the information itself. We're sure looking forward to that. But still, there are some takeaways that we can offer. First of all, faculty ask a lot of questions that can be addressed by tools and functionality already available to them. So if you look at row 15 here, that's 34 votes. And you know what, folks, that's really good news. That means if we simply raise awareness about the tools and functionality already available, then we're on our way to meeting their needs. Faculty expressed an interest in functionality that doesn't yet exist. For instance, they would like learning data available to them from rubrics and groups. They would like automated nudging and messaging capabilities in the Canvas environment. Also, we'd like to note that faculty would benefit from a more robust understanding of what engagement means with regard to learning data. An awful lot of the items gathered in here, particularly in this area, they address an interest in time. How much time are students spending? When are they spending that time? And I think a really interesting takeaway or work to be done with this content that we have here is to come up with some examples of what is a useful, effective question to be asking. What is an ineffective question? In other words, what can data around activity and engagement tell us? What can it not tell us? Those I think that we will benefit from providing our faculty with some robust instruction around that. Well, and I'll say I would benefit myself from an opportunity to reflect more on those fine distinctions. So also our faculty need to understand the distinction between using data in support of student learning and investigating academic dishonesty. And I think Gwen and I are especially sensitive to these issues that did come up in the context of these discussions, because this whole enterprise with learning analytics, learning data, it really rests on trust and transparency. And just one thing I would like to say about the structured conversation methodology. It is a totally judgment-free environment. So a lot of what our faculty give to us in this context, it's some insights into, for instance, misconceptions that they have, or it might lay bare some gaps in their knowledge, and that's all great information. It's all very helpful information, especially for those of us invested in the faculty development side of this. And Gwen, I do believe that we can turn it over to you to get to the good stuff. Gwen is going to talk about context for these findings.
Thanks, Lauren. So as Lauren said, our next step really is to share a high-level overview of some key context on 2 topics. And we're doing this because we hope that this overview will help you consider how the findings from the structured conversations that Lauren just shared might aid Unizin institutions in moving forward with learning analytics efforts. I want to stress, though, that this really is like the 50,000-foot view, and the idea is just for you to get a broad strokes picture and not to feel like you need to absorb the details. You won't need the details, just the broad strokes picture as we move into the discussion after I spend a few minutes kind of sketching out some of this key context. So the first set of context has to do with the Unizin data marts, and Bart, please, and other Unizin colleagues who may be here, please feel free to jump in and correct or add at any point. The Unizin data marts will provide analyses based in the Unizin data platform, or UDP, and data that have been ingested from our campuses for those of us who are from Unizin institutions. There are 4 levels of analysis available through the data marts, but today we're going to talk about 3 that are really germane to our purpose. The first level has to do with the individual student, and it involves the types and frequency of activity in Canvas. So an example might be homework submission rates. If I'm a student in an introductory course, how does my rate of homework submission compare to other students in the course? And an instructor might, for example, say, oh, here are students who are below 50% in terms of their rate of homework submission. Maybe I want to reach out to those folks, or folks in the lowest third of the class. Those are ways that instructors might use that type of information for individual interventions. One of the categories that Lauren mentioned that our participating instructors in the structured conversations were interested in pursuing. So that's the individual student level. The second level is the level of the whole course. And this level involves data on the impact of types and frequency of activity in Canvas within a course. So let's go back to our homework submission rate example. We might have a case where submitting 60% of homeworks in a particular course correlates with a greater likelihood of earning a C or better in that course. And this example actually is taken from an actual analysis at one of the Unizin campuses. So that's the course level. The third level is the program level, and this level has to do with types and frequency of activity in one course in a Canvas site. The activity is happening in one course, but the impact is being measured potentially in another course. So going back to our homework submission example, here's how that might play out. Let's say hypothetically that we have a prereq course in a sequence where submitting 80% of the homeworks in that prereq course correlates with a greater likelihood of earning a C or better on the first exam in the next course in the sequence. And we might see that kind of circumstance in a case where, say, the first several weeks of the next course in the sequence build extensively on the learning from the prereq course. That would be a case where we might see that type of example. So again, we're looking at these 3 levels: individual student, the whole course, and the program level. As I mentioned, just to be clear, there is a fourth level of analysis that focuses on predictive analytics, but for today's conversation, we think really these three levels that we just discussed are probably most useful in terms of the discussion question we will pose to you in a minute. So Lauren, if you could advance to the next slide. Thanks. So the UDP and the analyses coming out of it through the data marts, that was the first topic we wanted to cover. The second topic is the Stepping Stones initiative. And this is a faculty development curriculum. It's a cross-institutional initiative coming out of the Faculty Development Subcommittee of the Unizin Teaching and Learning Advisory Group. So in a way, it's a crowdsourcing project involving many colleagues from across different Unizin institutions. Its purpose is to produce resources that will prepare faculty to use learning analytics data effectively, ethically, and equitably. And it will achieve that purpose by providing a suite of materials that Unizin campuses can adopt and customize as needed. So within the Stepping Stones project, there are three learning pathways. One involves course design. As I think probably most folks here are aware, courses need to be constructed in Canvas in such a way that they will generate learning analytics data in order for us to get usable data. The second learning pathway has to do with helping faculty to understand, interpret, and use learning analytics data. And it involves helping faculty use these data to support students with individual interventions, as in some of the earlier examples, and by adjusting or improving their course materials and or their instructional delivery. So it can happen at the individual student level for intervention, or it can happen at the course, at the whole course level, whether that's through course design or through improved instructional approaches. The third learning pathway in the Stepping Stones project involves curricular analytics, which has to do with using data across multiple courses, like the example I gave a few minutes ago, where you might be looking at the relationship between activity in a prereq course and a subsequent course. Other examples would be you might look at the relationship between activity in a lecture course and an associated lab course, or across multiple courses in a major. So in developing the Stepping Stones resources, the team that's creating these resources and the learning pathways will explicitly draw on all of the findings that Lauren presented earlier from the structured conversations that have already happened, as well as we intend findings from future structured conversations. So we wanted to review these two topics, the Unizin data marts and the Stepping Stones projects, before moving into discussion, because we wanted to let you know what's coming in terms of the data marts, the faculty analyses that will be available to faculty and faculty teams on our campuses, as well as the work being done to build faculty development resources that will help faculty to use the analyses that the data marts make possible. So Lauren, if you could jump to the next slide. Thank you. And so we are now at the discussion portion of today's conversation. And to just move into that, I want to kind of set the context by saying that the structured conversations, as you have seen from what Lauren shared, these conversations give us significant feedback about faculty priorities, insights into misconceptions about learning data, as Lauren mentioned, lack of preparedness in some areas, as well as positive intentions that faculty bring. But regardless of faculty's preparation level, their readiness, the data and analyses will be available soon on our campuses, knowing that we are aware that we need to prepare faculty. And so because we are, Lauren and I and others on this call are deeply involved in designing the Stepping Stones Initiative resources, we'd like to ask your feedback first on a question with two parts, and get ready to put your thoughts in the chat and or to unmute and join the conversation. So here's the first two-part question. How might we leverage faculty feedback to prepare our instructors first to understand the analyses coming out of the UDP or the Unizin data platform. And second, to use those data effectively and ethically. So as I said, we want to invite you to unmute, to put your ideas in the chat. And you can see the question on the screen as well, but I'm just going to copy that question in the chat in case, Lauren, if you think it's helpful to stop share briefly while people are getting ready to share their thoughts and ideas. In case we want to do that, I've just put it in the chat.
And just jumping in here quickly, I don't think through Cvent that we can do the unmuting right now. I think this is more of like the presentation setup in Cvent, I believe.
Ah, good to know. In that case, please start typing. And if you need clarification about the question or want to raise related topics, it's all is fair game. So really looking for your feedback and thoughts about the implications of the data that Lauren shared, the patterns we're seeing and how instructors respond, and how those might help us to think about preparing faculty to use the analyses that are going to be available through the Unizin data marts quite soon.
And as folks are typing, just to jump in on the notion of data marts, because I had a question the other week as I was trying to talk a little bit about this. Someone said, what's a data mart? So just to clarify, if folks aren't sure what we're talking about here, the Unizin data platform is rather large and complex with a lot of different types of data. So a data mart is a much smaller subset of a lot of that different data that is pulled together in a very specific view of the data. Often that involves sort of calculated data fields. So the idea is it will add a high degree of flexibility to allow people to access that data much more easily than having to go into the larger Unizin data platform.
Super helpful. Thank you, Bart. And I want to read Stephen Williams' comment in the chat. Instructors could be provided examples of what effective and ethical use of learning data looks like to understand the decisions made and to structure their analysis to reflect these principles. Excellent, excellent suggestion. And one that I think will be especially helpful for those of us working on the curricular analytics part of the project and possibly others too. Danielle Patterson's comment, clearly link the data to the various aspects of their course through a quick tutorial of this data is linked to this part of your course. I think Lauren may be able to speak to that as a key concern for us. And the rest of Danielle's comment with some guided questions to help them reflect on what the data indicates.
Yeah, that's a great comment. How disappointing that we can't simply unmute and have an honest to goodness conversation, but your written text here is really useful.
And
I think
we may be able to try that.
What's that?
We may be able to try that. It's almost like a live demo, though. I'm not sure what'll happen here, but we could try it if you really want.
Push the button, Bart. I think that connecting the faculty insights that came from the structured conversations with the data from the UDP will be appreciated by instructors. Any other thoughts that you're willing to put into the chat for us?
Bart, do we think people should try unmuting to see if anybody's willing to do that?
Here, I have an option here to ask all to unmute. So if you'd like to speak, I think you can just accept this and then you should be able to talk. So let's give this a try.
Maybe some brave one of you can just test it, even if you don't have a comment, just to see if it works.
I'll test it.
Awesome.
Hey, it works.
I can hear you.
Oh,
Yeah, I think this idea is great, but I mean, several of our instructors, they get bombarded with so many elements that if we could do like a job aid, that's a quick, here's the screen, here's the data on the screen, it's connected here. Even if we can't maybe do one-on-one, consultations with them, they could have that time to go through and work with it a little bit more so that they don't feel overwhelmed with all the numbers that are, even though these are likely highly seasoned professionals, they know how to look at percentiles and everything coming in. I think that would get a little bit more buy-in on their side.
So I'm hearing that it would be very useful to have some pretty lightweight, just-in-time sort of documentation that they could be using.
Yes, because they might only look at it at the end of the semester or, right at the beginning of the next semester as they're maybe working with an instructional designer, which is what I do. They're like, oh, I realized they really weren't turning in this homework assignment. And maybe it's related to the fact that my instructions weren't very good or something along those lines.
I think this is a great point. Tanya Buchan is a colleague of mine at CSU, is on this call, and she and a few other colleagues and I were working yesterday with really streamlining and simplifying some instructions that our team provides to faculty here on preparing annual review materials in teaching. And we had gotten feedback from a department head about just how important it is to make this really super clear, really streamlined. So even if there's a lot of depth, I'll use the iceberg metaphor, even if there's a lot of depth below the waterline, that initial introduction has to be really streamlined and simple. And I think it's a great point for those of us working on the Stepping Stones initiative. Wondering if folks see other ways that either suggestions for as we design the faculty development resources, or if you have thoughts about rollout on our campuses. How can we introduce the idea of the data marts and the analyses that are going to be available and the faculty development resources in ways that are going to generate excitement and buy-in without this risk of overwhelm or some of the concerns that rightly do arise regarding ethics and privacy if folks don't have all of the information about how that's being addressed. So really interested in any ideas you might have to share.
It feels like it might be useful to find ways to connect it to the kind of work that they do. And I'm thinking, specifically an data mart or analyses or visualizations or whatever that ties to maybe the midterm grades they have to put in. Those kinds of things where it doesn't, so you can lower the barrier of it's one more thing I have to learn to, oh, it'll help me do something I already have to do more easily, and kind of just shift the frame on that. And I think the other thing I was thinking about was don't throw too many technical terms at them. Not all faculty are really comfortable with even just data and databases as a term. And so the Unizin Data Mart is going to mean nothing to them, to a lot of them, unfortunately, especially at the beginning. So we know the power of it and how great it is that the data is there and that we can do this kind of analysis, but keep it simple. I think your iceberg analogy is very helpful in that sense of like, just make it matter to them in places where they already feel pain and can immediately apply some of this.
That's a great idea. And I saw Vicki Malloy give a thumbs up to that. And it makes me think about, I'm guessing that other campuses might share this need. On our campus, many faculty, if not most, who are teaching large enrollment foundational courses need to submit information on early performance feedback. And that potentially could be a need filled by the data mart analyses. And it is a pain point for faculty who are teaching large sections, because when you have a lot of students, that can take some time. That's a great idea about helping to address somewhere that they already are experiencing a pain point.
Jennifer, I like that you are identifying specific critical points in the semester when it's going to matter to faculty. You know, we talk a lot about nudging students, reminding students. Would that be relevant with faculty, do you think, like reaching out to faculty at particular points in the semester because data might be useful at that point?
Oh, thanks for the thumbs up, Jennifer. I think that's a yes, Lauren.
I haven't thought too much about how that whole model of messaging and nudging could be applicable to faculty.
Yeah, same here, but that could be a really interesting conversation to think about how to engage faculty in using the data.
And I think everyone should have the ability to unmute, I think.
Great.
And if anybody has questions more broadly about the project or the results that we're getting or what we'll be doing in the future, please ask.
I'm guessing quite a few people on this call, if not everybody, have been involved in kind of rolling out new initiatives or new platforms. And I wonder if you all have wisdom to share based on your prior experience as far as aspects, kind of lessons learned about do's and don'ts, maybe that would apply generally, but especially any that you think would be particularly relevant to rolling out the availability of these analyses and also the faculty development resources.
So I can put on my Penn State hat. I see Marilyn here, and I think Marilyn is involved in some of this work at Penn State now. Before I came to Unizin, it wasn't as much on the faculty side, but more on the advisor side, where Penn State had put some learning analytics projects in place. And much like Jennifer said, attaching it to a point in time in which there are challenges, right, that faculty or advisors face was really beneficial to us. So for us, it was early progress reporting, right? So at week 3 of the semester is when advisors ask faculty to supply data about student performance, and depending on how that course is designed, that faculty member may not have a lot to report. So different types of Canvas activity data or Canvas activity roll-ups with the data that comes out of the UDP became very helpful there. And with advisors and with some of the faculty as well, at Penn State, we found case studies to be really valuable teaching tools, especially ones that try and put people in maybe some ethically questionable territory, uncomfortable territory, right? But do it in a safe space with just sort of a focus group of advisors and try and have them walk through how they would wrestle with those kind of scenarios. That seemed to work well on Penn State's campus.
That's all really helpful. And we're in the curricular analytics group, we're working a lot with scenarios, but I don't think we had thought about that approach of maybe confront folks with some ethical dilemmas in the midst of that. So super helpful. Bart, I don't know if there's anything that can be done about this, but Jennifer Smith says folks cannot unmute anymore. I don't know what happened.
Okay, so here, let me hit the ask all to unmute button so everyone hopefully sees the message. Okay, there. So I just hit the ask all to unmute. I see at least one microphone unmuted there.
I think that was Marilyn. Thanks, Marilyn.
Okay, so I think that's working now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I think the, what Jennifer said and kind of the general idea of the conversation that, that little just-in-time thing, the what you need, when you need it, But what I'm kind of curious, and maybe folks here have an idea, is like, how do we actually get that to faculty at the time they need it? So I think that's the big thing. And I guess, you know, the one idea is, you know, can it be one of those announcements that's in Canvas when you first log in? You know, it's, I don't know if you all have it, but there's announcements there. The only thing is nobody ever looks at those. I know I don't, and I'm ashamed to admit that. But yeah, if anyone has ideas on really how to get that targeted bit of information in a time efficient way to those faculty at the right time, that would be awesome, in a way that they will actually see it and read it.
I think that's a great question, and it really kind of amplifies or echoes what Danielle is asking in the chat. Where would these data be housed? Would the faculty need to access another site, or is it built into sites they already interact with? So I think it's that same topic of how do we get the information to them in this just-in-time kind of way.
And just to be clear, in these structured conversations, we used as the foundation, the door to entry to the conversation was the new analytics in Canvas, because we know that across all our institutions or all faculty have access to this tool that is, and the series of dashboards that are built into Canvas. So that was our starting point. So that's Canvas, data within Canvas and available to faculty in that context.
And I would contrast with that, the curricular analytics level data are likely going to rely on queries to the Unizin data platform. And in those cases, from the examples we're seeing coming out of University of Iowa and maybe some other places, it looks like that work will need to be done. The actual queries and analyses will need to be done by, say, colleagues in our units who might be supporting faculty and the like. So that raises another set of questions as far as how we engage faculty.
Targeting departmental meetings. That's a good idea. I'm responding to Jennifer's comment in the chat.
I think that's a great point. I think another, in a way, this is a slow mechanism, but it can be an effective one, and that is academic program review. Most departments need to complete academic program review every several years.
One thing I'm thinking of is a different initiative that we worked on at Colorado State, but where for adaptive courseware, where we tried to reach out with faculty that we had worked with from our teaching and learning center that were kind of innovators and like to try new things and liked technology that we had worked with, and conducted a pilot with them and kind of wrapped it in as a pilot and tried to use that as a way to grow some momentum around using that particular courseware. And it really was a pilot, but we learned a lot from it, and then we could kind of go to the next layer, and they could be ambassadors to help maybe encourage the next group of folks to participate. So kind of a grassroots approach to it might be another way to try.
Are faculty incentivized at all to, as you say, act as sort of an ambassador for other faculty?
Well, in the one case, it was part of a grant, so we did have some incentives to be a part of the grant. They weren't incentivized to recruit others necessarily, but we would talk to chairs or department heads depending on the department, and sometimes it came from the faculty members themselves, and sometimes it came as kind of a little mini initiative that the department wanted to try for a particular course that was maybe had a course coordinator. And so this was a way to work on student success and tie it into an initiative that we had at the institution. So we kind of tried all sorts of avenues, actually.
So we are at time here. Is there anything, Gwen or Lauren, in closing you want to share before we move on to the last session of the day here in about 15 minutes?
We just want to invite, first we want to say for those of you who are at Unizin institutions, as I know some folks are, we will share the findings both through the Unizin website's news page and through the Teaching and Learning Advisory Group. If there's anyone here who is not part of a Unizin institution and you would like to get a link to the findings, once we've got the report and everything finalized, just maybe drop your name and email address in the chat and we will make sure that that reaches you. And thank you so much for coming and for jumping in with our hard questions at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen and Lauren. Enjoy the rest of the summit, everyone.